This is Dan Schneider on this Dan Schneider video interview. My guest is Sean Kanan. It's another of my Actors on Acting series, and the conversation will begin in a moment. Sean Kanan is my guest. People who are film fans will know him probably best from his role in the Karate Kid films. People who are fans of television or soap operas will know him from the CBS soap operas, Young and Restless and Bold and the Beautiful. ABC fans will know him from General Hospital. Sean, welcome. I'd just like to give you a few minutes to give a little bit of background about yourself, who you are, what did you come from, an acting family, that sort of thing.
First of all, thank you so much for having me on your show. I appreciate it. It's nice to finally connect with you for this. I didn't come from an acting family. You know, it's funny, they say that there's two types of people. They say there's artists and scientists. So I guess technically I came from a family of scientists, although they were really not scientists. They were business people. So it was a little bit of a surprise to my family when I didn't want to take over our family business, which was retail jewelry, and I wanted to go into the arts. I grew up in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, which is a town in western Pennsylvania, about 45 minutes west of Pittsburgh. And I went to school in Boston. I went to Boston University, where I was majoring in political science, and had started taking some acting classes. And then I transferred to UCLA, where I graduated. I got my degree in political science. Was out here beginning my acting career in about 1987.
Well, let me ask you, just to clear up some things, because on the internet there's always lots of rumors. I've read that you were...
Rumors on the internet?
Yeah.
No, come on.
I've read that you are actually related to some of the General Hospital actors, Steve Burton, who played your brother Jason on General Hospital, as well as the Cheatwood brothers, Dirk and Drew Cheatwood. Is that correct?
No, I'm not related to Dirk and Drew, although they're good friends. Steve and I are actually distant cousins by marriage.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just talk then about acting in general. Oh, well, let me one other question before I start. I didn't know this until I looked it up, but with your name, Sean Kanan, and looking blonde and fair skin, I assumed you were of Anglo-Irish stock. It was odd when I saw that you're actually Jewish and you're involved with the Anti-Defamation League. Was that a name change because, like, an agent said, no, your name was too Jewish, or?
No. There's so many Jewish actors, and I can't imagine that would be a problem. No, for me, first of all, the majority of my background is Eastern European, Russian, Polish, Lithuanian. But it's funny, I did that Ancestry.com thing, and it turns out that I'm 19% seafaring Viking, so maybe that's where I get the blonde hair from.
Well, I'm half Norwegian, so maybe we're distantly related.
So the reason actually for the name change was that when I came out to Hollywood, Cheers was still in production, and there was the actress Rhea Perlman who was on Cheers, and then Ron Perlman was doing that series Beauty and the Beast. And so there were two other very well-known actors that already had the same name. And at the time, my manager said to me, I think we got to come up with a different name for you. And I was like, oh, that's going to go over great with the old man. And my manager was driving down the 405 freeway one day, and there's an exit called Kanan Dune Road. And he called me up and he said, I think I have your new name. And I said, what is it? And he said, it's Sean Kanan. And I said, Kanan, huh? All right, that's kind of cool. It's got kind of a vaguely biblical sound to it, like the land of Canaan. And
yeah.
I said, all right. So from that day forward, I became Sean Kanan.
Well, let me ask you about the art of acting itself, because especially you who've done a number of soap operas, you're playing characters for months or years at a time through arcs and whatnot. Whereas if you're guesting on a television show, you might have a 10-minute role as the guest villain, or the guy standing around at CSI, coming up with a solution. If you're on a film, you're away for 2 or 3 months, maybe playing a character that maybe has 20 minutes of screen time. Do you get invested in characters, and especially when you're doing serial drama, have you been invested in more of your serial characters than you were in some of your film or television primetime roles?
That's a really great question. I would have to say the characters that I tend to get the most invested in are when I do theater roles. Theater really lends itself towards having the longest rehearsal process, and I think you really get to dig in the deepest on those roles. Yeah, like you said, you're exactly right. Sometimes when you do a TV role, you're in for a couple days, and you get as invested as you can. Obviously, trying to bring as much reality and background to the characters. But I've been really fortunate that I played two very long-term roles in daytime, A.K. Quarterman and Deacon Sharp, and I've got very invested in both of those characters. But I mean, I try to get invested in every character I do. But you made an interesting point that sometimes the work situation due to time doesn't allow you to get as invested as you would when you've got lots and lots of time. I don't know if that's a good answer, but I think it's accurate.
If in theater, one of the other actors I interviewed gave me an anecdote about Jason Robards, that when you're playing the same character, doing the same thing several hundred times, there are going to be inevitably, last Tuesday you gave a shit performance, and but only you may know it. The audience may not know that you were off your game because they're only seeing you that one night. When you are doing theater and you're doing that same repetition, how do you keep it new? Because if you have to go stage right but beyond the sofa, you can only do it a certain amount of ways.
I think, generally speaking, unless you're doing a one-man show, it's really organic because you're dealing with other actors and it's new for them every night.
Yeah.
And so the combination of them having a slightly new performance generates a unique and new performance for me every night. It's funny. You're ignoring the audience when they're there, obviously, but invariably there are different types of audiences. You'll hear people who do theater say, "Oh, it's a listening audience." It's an audience that's not clapping. It's an audience that's really just being very, very quiet and listening. And sometimes you have audiences that are kind of raucous and loud, and they laugh at every other line, and invariably it changes the tempo. I don't want to say it throws it off. It changes the tempo, and even though you're, for all intents and purposes, ignoring the audience, there is a subtle shift in energy inside the theater, and I think that tends to change the performances and make it fresh and unique every night.
Have you noticed actor stratification within the business? Because, for example, for the last few months I've been watching some old-time television shows from the 50s and 60s, and for a while acting on television was déclassé compared to film stars of the 40s and 50s. And then there's always been the difference between primetime soap operas, dinner theater, and Broadway kind of thing. Do you know, I mean, because since you've done so many different types of things, and for example, you started out in The Karate Kid, I believe it's the third film, where you played a bad guy. Was there sort of an internal letdown? You say, "Oh God, I'm doing a soap opera. I'm going backwards in my career." Is there that kind of stratification even within your mind, even though you're getting work?
I remember as a young guy, I was extremely excited to have a very consistent and at the time high-paying job, and so I was real happy. And I think that in the past there has been a stigma between film and television. I think the television now that's being created specifically for Netflix and Amazon, a lot of the original programming is not only some of the best stuff that's on TV, but much of it is as good as film. Film will always have the larger budgets, the fancier, shootouts, car scenes, special effects. But really, right now, some of the very best of the best work is coming, and best entertainment is coming from television. As far as daytime, there's still a horrendous stigma. It's very difficult for daytime actors to make the jump to other venues. It's one of the reasons that I consistently try and do as much work outside of daytime as possible, so that I'm not pigeonholed just as a daytime actor. But it is a struggle. But I think actors at every level have struggles. I mean, unless you're one of the 5 or 6 guys like your Brad Pitt, your Brian Gosling, your whoever, you're really another actor trying to find a job. Just it's sort of, albeit at different stratospheres of the business.
I noticed by looking on your IMDb page that you've also done some voice work. I would assume you've probably done commercial work. Is there any difference when you're doing just the voice of a cartoon character or just a voiceover in that you're trying to inflect more into the performance since you don't have a physical presence?
I actually have not done a whole lot of voiceover.
No?
While I have done commercials, I haven't done a lot of them. Yeah, I think every single medium has different, different benefits and different challenges. I think the thing with commercials, for the most part, is having that ability to be sort of that everyman that everyone can relate to. I haven't done a whole lot of commercials. I have a lot of respect for actors that do commercials. In a lot of ways, there's a lot of the same parameters that go into acting for film and TV, and then there's a lot of things that are very different. You're encapsulating a message in like 30 seconds, and it's an entire sales pitch in 30 seconds told in a short form story commercial. So I think there's an art to it.
When you are acting, and one of the reasons I'm doing these series of interviews is because I think acting is a thing that's so in most people's lives, like pop songs, that people don't realize that it is in and of itself an art form apart from the writing of a play or a screenplay. What do you actually, is there some demiurge in you that you are using to fuel your interpreting of someone else's lines or someone else's vision of a character?
Let me think about that for a second. I think for me, and this may not be a direct answer to the question, but one of the reasons that I got into acting is because I believe that actors and writers are the storytellers. We're the ones who have the ability to convey to a large number of people, hopefully, something interesting, something beautiful, something that affects thought and change and consciousness. That doesn't always happen. It's not like every single thing that you're acting in is a piece of art and it's doing that. But that's the aspiration. That someday you get that one part that affects a large group of people and really brings some kind of an interesting and positive change to their belief system. And that's why I do what I do. For me, this is my medium. For an artist to use oil paintings, that's their medium. For a playwright, that's theirs. And there's so many different art forms. So I think that's largely why I do what I do, and why I think it's important.
When have you felt most fulfilled as an actor in a role or a scene? I mean, was there some movie role? Was it a guest role? Was it a role when you were playing Deacon or AJ that you had a particular storyline, you were working with a particular actor or actress, and bang, you got it? And what was the reaction of fans to that, perhaps? You may have felt fulfilled as an artist, but they may have been, like, well, that's out of character kind of thing.
I have two thoughts that are sort of very divergent thoughts in my head right now. The one is there's a famous story that there was a letter written by a woman named, it was Agnes de Mille, and she said that the artist can only hope for a divine sense of dissatisfaction, which means that very rarely do you walk off the stage and sort of feel like, wow, I killed it. I just feel so great about that. It's that sort of ambiguous feeling of I think it was good, but I could have done this. You know what I mean? It's a dissatisfaction that you almost always wish you could do it again. And I think it's that dissatisfaction which continues to push us to want to do more and do better. The times in my career I think that I felt the most satisfied were the times that I have written scripts and seen them go from the genesis of a script to actually being a completed project. I've written one feature film called Chasing Holden, which Lionsgate distributed years ago. I was extremely proud of that. And I made another film called March, which I actually did with Rena Sofer, who I've worked with extensively on Bold and Beautiful and General Hospital. And funny, this year is actually the 15th anniversary of that film. And it's a terrific drama. I wanted to talk about it during our interview. It's actually on Vimeo right now. If people go to my Twitter page, which is Sean Kanan at Twitter, there's a link to go and find the film. And I was really proud of this film because I made it with two of my friends from my hometown in Pennsylvania. We were literally sitting on the stoop of a gas station when we were about 14, 15 years old, maybe a little older maybe. And my one friend, Dean, had written the script. My other friend, Jim, wanted to direct it, and I wanted to produce and star in it. And several years later, we actually made this film. And for me, that was a really defining moment. The film got terrific reviews. We got some really great talent to be in it, and to have watched it go from this conversation at a gas station in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, to being screened in Hollywood was really an almost inexplicable feeling of satisfaction and almost euphoria. It just felt incredible.
Well, I know that some actors that I've talked to, a lot of them wish that they had bigger name, bigger drawing power so that they could do projects they pursue.
Right.
Do you think that there is some kind of ethical, responsibility that an actor has to the art form, i.e. that if you're Kevin Costner when he was big, or Julia Roberts, or somebody, that they should, for example, invest back into the community of acting and not just do blockbusters, but maybe do a role where, let's say if you had Julia Roberts as the main female character and said, Sean, someone passed me your script, I'd love to do it to help you out. Or do you think that there's, it's just a business?
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Do I think we have an ethical responsibility? I think everybody's got their own internal moral barometer. I mean, I can't speak for anyone else's ethical responsibility. I mean, for me, I've always felt that, whatever I can do to help, I can help young actors in their career, I try and do. I believe you do stuff like that with no expectation. I've had some opportunities in my career as a younger actor to have other actors help me, and I believe in paying it forward. But I think a lot of these actors that do these blockbuster movies, they do have production companies that, they do blockbusters a lot of times so that it puts them in a financial position that allows them to take independent films, to give new directors and new screenwriters, an opportunity to have their works produced. So I think there is a lot of that giving back among a lot of the bigger stars. I think that the general public may not always be aware of how that works, but I think that does happen. For me, I think there is an ethical responsibility. I mean, I can't really speak for anybody else.
Well, before we go on and speak about some of your roles in the next segment, I do want to ask just a few questions since we have some limited time, and this is regards basically soap acting and stuff. But before I talk about that, I did see you online. I think it might have been on Netflix in some kind of documentary talking about how soap operas have fallen from grace. There's only 4 major soap operas left in the U.S., whereas telenovelas and Coronation Street are still big around the world. And you had claimed basically you think it started with the O.J. Simpson trial, and that this sort of filtered out fans and spurred reality TV. And if people could watch reality TV, why watch fake people, rich people screwing each other? Do you still believe that, or was that just some hyperbole?
No, I absolutely believe what I said. I mean, the phenomenon that was created with the O.J. Simpson trial really was the vanguard of the whole reality TV movement. I mean, people were glued to that. Reality TV was more or less born then. And, then reality TV, of course, became scripted reality TV. I mean, I think now pretty much everyone realizes that reality TV really is scripted television. And I think that it has has had its heyday, and I think reality television, I would say it's on the decline. I also think that another issue that lent itself to the decline of soap operas were talk shows, daytime talk shows. They were cheaper to produce, and it gave birth to a number of iconic daytime stars, obviously not the least of which was Oprah. I think people inevitably had more choices what to watch during the afternoon. The one thing about soap operas, why I think that even though they've declined, they do still remain viable, is that people have invested in these characters for a long time. And when you invest in characters and you're watching them in emotional stories that really resonate with the viewer, they tune in to watch them. We've definitely seen a culling of the herd. I mean, I think one time there were 8 or 9 soap operas, maybe more.
Yeah.
And I think now there's 4. And unfortunately, now they're potentially talking about getting rid of Days of Our Lives.
Yeah.
It's kind of unfortunate. But I've been lucky enough to be on two of the stronger ones. But yeah, to answer your question, I think I do stand by what I said. I think that reality TV really sort of was a nail in the coffin of daytime. Fortunately, it wasn't the final nail. But now I think after well over almost 2 decades, daytime television reality television is on the decline.
Well, when you talk about character integrity, it's not only character integrity for the viewer, but the actor too. And I know that you had played the character. I'm a General Hospital watcher back from the late 70s. I'd never really watched the CBS soaps, so I don't know much about the Deacon character. But I know that in your mid-90s stint, you played AJ, then Billy Warlock took over the role. The character was killed off on his watch. You brought the character back for about 1.5 years. And it was rumored that, for example, that you were dissatisfied, as well a lot of the fans, was that the character of AJ was never allowed to grow. Do you ever find that you get attached to a character and that you're having a character written in ways that seemingly are dead-ended and don't profit the show in any way? Or are you someone who just goes in and says, well, they're going to have me, become a transgender psycho killer, and how attached are you to your own characterizations?
I think actors, especially in daytime, tend to get very attached to their characters. That being said, I'm hired to do a job, which is to interpret the scripts that I'm given. Actors have, for the most part, very little input on their character. And there have been many times that I've been given storylines that I wasn't really crazy about. My job as an actor is to take that storyline, to elevate it, and to not only make it watchable, but to make it compelling. So I think that's the stock and trade of most day-to-day actors, is that getting material that you're very blessed in this business when you get really terrific material. That's not usually the norm. So when you get some really great stuff, you get a really great storyline on a soap opera, or a really terrific script, crosses your table that they finally want you for. That's like manna from heaven.
Yeah. Well, you have about 60 credits or so on your IMDb page. There may be more out there that are there. But I know, and this is the final question before we go to the next segment about some of the specific roles, but in daytime especially, people like Susan Lucci or Tony Geary, some other older time actors who played characters for 25, 30 years, inevitably the fans notice that the characters fall into a rut. Since you've sort of bounced around 4 or 5 soaps, have you found that's actually been a good thing for your craft as an actor, that you weren't playing AJ, for example, for 25 years?
Yeah, I think so because it seems like every time I come back to one of the soaps, they write me a really terrific entrance, and the part is being reinvigorated. So yes, I would say that that's an advantage. That being said, it sure would be nice to have a steady job on television for 25 years.
Yeah.
That hasn't been the trajectory of my career. But, I've also been able to leave daytime, do other things, and come back. And generally when I come back, the writers are reinvigorated for the character, and it tends to be kind of a hot storyline for a while.
Yeah.
I think inevitably for every character, when you play a character long term, the character's going to lull. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't have a hot storyline for 25 years. It just doesn't happen. It waxes and it wanes, and that's kind of the nature of the beast.
Yeah. Well, let's end this segment. In the next segment, I want to talk about some of your most well-known roles, and we'll do that in a moment. I'm speaking with actor Sean Kanan about acting and his career. We touched upon some of the technical stuff of how an actor prepares for a role and does a role. I want to talk a little bit about the thing that probably people first heard your name in, and that was a role in the Karate Kid 3. And this was, at the time, a major film franchise, as they call it, and you played a character. And I know one of the people who asked me to ask a question about the General Hospital roles wanted to know and told me that you actually got injured on the set. Is that correct? And how? And
that is, I had a life-threatening injury while I was doing the film.
What exactly happened? And were you out for like 6 months? Did they have to stop shooting?
No. I'll tell you what happened. So we were going to break for Christmas. And I had one last stunt that I had to do. It was a really simple stunt. It was basically, I was standing in a stationary position, and I had to throw myself about 2 feet away and land on the floor. And it was going to be like a match shot. They were going to have a shot of me coming through a door, and that was me falling on the floor. Anyway, as we broke for the holidays, I noticed I was having some really significant pain in my left thigh. And I attributed that to all the martial arts that I was doing. I thought I was sore, so I was taking a lot of aspirin. I went to Las Vegas, and I was with a friend, and it was Christmas Day, 1990, I believe. And I passed out, and I came to, the paramedics took me to Humana Sunrise Hospital, and they told me I was dying, that I'd been bleeding internally, and because I was taking aspirin, it exacerbated the bleeding. And they had to take me to surgery. And I said, well, what do you mean, like Monday? And they said, no, 15 minutes. And so my parents flew out. They got like the only plane tickets they could get. I think it was like the middle of the night. And they did emergency surgery on me. I had internal bleeding. And they were able to stop the bleeding. And the studio called me, and they basically told me, that I had about 10 days to get back to work. They had just enough of me on film that they weren't going to recast, but they said if I didn't get back to work in 10 days, they were going to recast. And so I discharged myself from the hospital against the doctor's advice, and I came back, and they decided they were going to get a stuntman to do all my karate. They were going to use me for the close-ups and have a stuntman do all the karate, which is certainly not an ideal situation. I had been training in martial arts since I was 13, and that just did not sit well with me. And so I had a guy who was a lineman for the Rams at the time, and he rehabilitated me. We worked out every day, and the one smart thing that I did before I went into surgery is because half of my family are doctors. And they said, look, whatever you do, because they had to go in and do abdominal exploratory surgery, I said, don't cut the muscles. Don't cut the abdominal muscles. Make sure you reset them. Because I knew if they cut my abdominal muscles, I was out for 5-6 months. So they resected the muscles, fixed the internal bleeding, and I was able to rehabilitate myself. And I ultimately did all of my own stunts in that movie, except for one stunt which, if you know the movie well, there's a scene where my character Mike Barnes is with the other heavies in the movie, and we're riding around in this convertible Mustang, and then we cross these train tracks just as a train comes by. And they did use a stuntman for that stunt, and I was pretty happy about that. I didn't really have much of a desire to go speeding past a train, but I did all my own martial arts in that. And for that reason, that was a really special movie to me because, you know, at a very young age, I learned that I wasn't bulletproof, and, you know, I was told that I might not live, and I also fought my way back. And it taught me that I had that, you know, that instinct inside of myself. It taught me something about myself that, you know, you don't really know until you're confronted with it. So that movie has a really special place in my heart.
I've mentioned some of the other soaps you've worked on, but actually the first soap that it looks like you're on was Sunset Beach, which is now a defunct soap back in the 1990s. How did you get that role?
That wasn't the first one. General Hospital was the first one.
Oh, it was?
Sunset Beach was after that, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, Well, I'm relying on IMDb, so I guess. But before we talk about General Hospital, when you did Sunset Beach, that would have been after General Hospital. What role did you play? Were you a bad guy? Was it just like a week's role?
It's funny. I played this character named Jude Kavanaugh, and he was kind of like this rakish guy, you know, like a young sort of heartthrob type guy. And then we found out the show was going off the air, and suddenly I get this script, and it's this big reveal that I've been an FBI double agent, secret spy, whatever. So you never know what you're going to get when you're doing a soap opera. I'll never forget, I think I had this line, Jude Kavanaugh, special agent. You know? So for me, that was a lot of fun because back in the 90s, you know, Aaron Spelling was a powerhouse in television. And I really had wanted to work with Aaron for a long time. And when I finally got Sunset Beach, you know, that was an Aaron Spelling production. I was really so proud to work with him. You know, he's created so much television history. You know, I grew up on his shows, on Love Boat, on Fantasy Island, on all of that. And it was a big honor to work for him.
Well, let's just backtrack then to General Hospital. I mentioned that Billy Warlock had taken over from you in that role, but you were not the first adult A.J. Quartermain. A fellow named Gerald Hopkins was. How did they get the role? Were they not satisfied with where the character was going, and did you bring something different to the role? Because in looking back on YouTube clips, your character seemed to be more emotionally centered than the portrayal by Hopkins was.
You know, I don't know what the circumstances were, why Gerald left the show. I know that when there was an opening, you know, Steve Burton and I were very good friends, and he said, look, they're hiring a part for my brother, and, you know, Steve and I at the time looked, it was striking, the similarity, physically, how much we looked alike. And, you know, people commented on it all the time, and we would even get mistaken for each other. And so when they brought me into screen test for Steve's brother, I was the only actor they brought in. So he looked at me, he's like, you better not screw this up, because if you do, you know, it's not like you're getting beaten out by another actor. It's like, you know, this is kind of your part to lose. And so I screen tested, and I think once they saw the chemistry that Steve and I had on screen, because we had a friendship off screen, you know, that was one of the huge contributing factors to why I got the part. And I think that my run at General Hospital was really successful because Steve and I had such a believable chemistry on screen.
Yeah, and fans of General Hospital, the 1990s was basically, I think, the Quartermain family was probably the dominant reason a lot of people watched, because there was you, there was Steve, there was Stuart Damon, Leslie Charlson, there was Anna Lee. I don't think you played with David Lewis as Edward. You played.
You know, I think David may have just passed away when I came on.
Okay, so you were with.
I worked extensively with Anna Lee though.
And John Ingle.
And John Ingle, sure.
Was that a good working relationship on set then?
It was a good working relationship with the other actors. I liked the other actors a lot. it was difficult because I was told that AJ is supposed to be the jerk. And, you know, no actor, no matter what character you play, plays jerk. I mean, everybody has their wants and needs, and thinks that what they're doing, you know, because it's what's best for them. And so I said, well, that's really tough for me to play the jerk. I said, I want to make this a multi-layered performance and create a character that's, you know, not just black or white, but you know, integrated shades of gray. And it was difficult because at the protosorial level, they had a very specific idea of whom AJ was supposed to be and how he was supposed to function with the other characters. And I think one of the smart things that I did as a young actor was I did my best to let them think they were getting what they wanted, but also did my best to create as many moments of vulnerability and you know, sort of pathos with his characters I could. And so I like to think that while AJ may have ostensibly been a jerk, he was also a really flawed, tragic character, and that's what kind of made the audience root for him.
Yeah, back in the 70s and 80s, soap operas seemed to pair people together, and if actors had a certain chemistry, they would change storylines and whatnot. It seems to me, as a longtime viewer, that the storylines are more rigid today, that in the soap business, the characters are going to do this, that, or the other thing, and there are missed opportunities. For example, I mentioned Tony Geary. His character was supposed to be, of Luke Spencer, was supposed to just be on for a few weeks. He caught on, and he became, you know, the dominant star in that show's history.
Right.
I doubt that could happen today, even if there were more people watching soaps, because they don't seem to pick up on, oh, this actor has something going.
There was a very unique dynamic that lent itself to the success of Luke and Laura. The first was that there was a television strike, and really the only television that was being produced at the time were soap operas, because soap operas are governed by the AFTRA union, not SAG. So that's one of the reasons. I mean, really, some of the only stuff that was on TV at the time were soap operas, specifically General Hospital. The other interesting factor was that Luke is this guy that raped Laura, and she fell in love with him. So it was this, you know, born out of this horrible act was this incredible love story, which was, you know, just shocking to so many people, as it should be. You know, it was augmented by the fact that they're two terrific actors.
Yeah.
So I don't know that could necessarily happen again, because, you know, we have 1,000 channels,
yeah,
you know, at our disposal now, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
If there was ever a television strike, it could almost go unnoticed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't know that could ever happen again. It was a very unique set of variables that came together to form this perfect storm of why Luke and Laura became this phenomenon. You know, at one point in time, Luke and Laura were, you know, Tony Geary and Jeannie Francis were probably the two most famous people on the planet.
Well, let me ask about your Deacon Sharp character. As I mentioned, I've never been a CBS soap watcher, but your character went from one soap to the other. I think he was, from what I'm reading, was created in Young and Restless and then went to Bold and Beautiful.
The other way around.
The other way around?
Yeah.
So is that difficult because you have different writers, a different set, and so you may know the character A, B, and C, but they want X, Y, and Z the minute the character comes onto that set? Is there any issue like that?
It wasn't difficult. I mean, you know, Brad Bell created this character. So for me, I'm always, I think it's always best when Brad is writing for Deacon. But what was fun was to go to this other show where none of the characters really knew who I was and what my history was. You know, they knew that I was supposed to be this kind of manipulative, con man, bad guy. But it was fun because as a con man looks for his marks and tries to obscure who he really is, I was able to do that with the other characters because these were all new actors that I hadn't worked with. So for me, it was really fun.
So is Deacon sort of the polar opposite of AJ as a character? Because AJ has always been sort of portrayed as sort of the the loser, the schlemiel of the Quartermain family, and of poor Charles. Is Deacon more or less, to just use an example, so is he more of a Sonny Corinthos or a Luke Spencer kind of character?
I would hesitate to make any analogy of Deacon to any other character. I think he's a really unique character. I want to point out, external differences. I mean, AJ is a guy that has been given every single advantage and blessing that, wealth and position can afford you. And Deacon was the guy who grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, did not go to college. His mother was a stripper. His stepfather was an abusive alcoholic. So, not a lot of similarities between the two characters.
Okay. Well, I mentioned that since we have limited time, I do want to get in a few questions specifically that people that I'm on an IMDb General Hospital board had wanted to ask you specifically about General Hospital and your character of AJ. And one of the people had asked, would you come back to General Hospital if they had asked you to play the character of AJ, since he's supposedly been killed off, but he was killed before as well? And also, and if you don't want to answer this question, that's fine. The person wanted to know what challenges you may have faced playing AJ, since you've had addiction in your own life.
Would I come back to General Hospital? That's a tough question. I don't think it would be at the top of my list.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be at the top of their list either. It would have to be a significantly different set of circumstances, probably, for it to work either way. I think a lot of the issues that I've dealt with in my own life, obviously, an actor draws upon his own experience, and I think that helped me play AJ. I'm in a very different position now in my life than I was in my early 30s, and I hopefully was able to bring more maturity and even more depth to the character this last go round. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah. Another person had wanted to know that, do you think that soap operas have inherent biases? For example, characters like the Tony Geary character, or Maurice Bernard, Sonny Corinthos, or, to use All My Children, Susan Lucci, that their characters, the stories and the best storylines tend to gravitate towards them. And going back to what I'd asked about character integrity, do you think that characters like that, would I guess you'd call them secondary then, like the AJ character, are sometimes thrown under the bus for the betterment of the bigger name draws?
I think that each show has its central characters, as does any show. Generally, the storyline emanates in spokes from that hub. Like I said, I think you're really blessed when you get a good storyline, a lead storyline. But if you're not one of the primary characters, then generally speaking, your storylines tend to integrate with theirs, but will generally be subordinated to theirs.
Yeah. A poster who says that he had actually worked behind the scenes on General Hospital in the 90s. His handle is Jared McDonald. I don't know if that name rings a bell, but he wanted to ask, do you think that acting has changed in the 25 or so years that you've been on the soaps? Is there more pressure to do it without mistakes, that there aren't as many retakes?
I think for sure it's changed in daytime. I mean, like I said, daytime is, the number of shows has diminished dramatically. Therefore, the shows have to be leaner and meaner. They have to operate, with less of a budget and have a higher output of shows, which mandates that the actors work more efficiently. I always wonder. I don't see how some of these. It's very difficult if you don't have that skill set of being able to learn a large volume of dialogue very quickly it almost doesn't matter how good an actor you are, because if it's going to take you 7 or 8 takes to get the scene done, the simple economics dictate that it's going to be very difficult for you to survive in the medium.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the great things that I've been blessed with, is that, coming up in the 90s and being able to, I did over 1,000 shows of daytime. It really taught me to be able to make, very quick choices regarding the material, and then commit it to memory, and then be able to do it. And I think it's kind of like going to the gym. I mean, it's not something that necessarily everybody has right away. It's something that you kind of have to develop. And I feel bad for some of these younger actors that may be talented guys and girls, but they come and they're sort of overwhelmed by the workload.
Yeah. Another question is, how far in advance do you get the script, and are there ever times you come in to a situation thinking that the character is going to do A, and then they say, no, AJ this time is going to do B, and you've spent several days learning your lines, and then boom, you have to on the fly?
Very, very rarely are there changes in story from the time you get the script. There may be some subtle changes in dialogue, but very rarely are there changes in the story. I'm sorry, what was the other part of the question?
Have you ever just gotten like a U-turn that you come in and your character's gonna?
Yeah, not too often. That really doesn't happen, because there's so many different working parts. I mean, it's the sets have been, the specific sets they need are there. I mean, the other actors have learned their lines. To change story is not really a small feat. So really, they're very hesitant to do that from a production standpoint.
Well, let me just ask the final question from one of the fans on the board, and that was, when you came back after however many years it was, 18 years, the show had changed in the sense that the Quartermain family, which was, as I had mentioned, at the center of General Hospital in the 1990s, had been basically dismantled. I think when you came back, only Leslie Charlson was the only, and Tracy, Jane Elliott was the only. Yeah.
And then I think actually Wally Kurth came back for a while.
Yeah, and so you was there a sense that the character was being written short term because there weren't the supporting characters like the Damons and the Ingalls and the Annalees as before, or was, what was the difference as far as vis-a-vis the characters placed within the Quartermains and also General Hospital?
It's a funny thing. AJ has consistently been written. How can I say this? The characters always had significant obstacles, and that seemed to be the case when I came back this last time. Right? I think, obviously, in the 80s and 90s, when the Quartermains were really that powerhouse, it afforded more story. I think it did make it more difficult for AJ, because the Quartermains were less of a central component of the show. But yeah, I would say fairly early on in this last return, I realized that this was not going to be a long-term gig, which I thought was unfortunate. But really, that was largely out of my hands. I tried to do the absolute best that I could with the material I was given and the opportunity, and I was very appreciative of the opportunity, and to come back for the 50th anniversary of General Hospital. It was a very special time to come back. General Hospital is certainly a piece of the television tapestry. There's a lot of history in it, and to come back for the 50th anniversary, I thought was really a special thing, and so I'm actually very appreciative to ABC, it's the producer Frank Valentini, and everybody for that opportunity.
Well, let me just ask a final question in this segment, and then we'll wrap things up in the final segment. I know that when you came back, your character had come back from the dead, and they paired you up with Becky Herbst, and that seemed, a lot of fans seemed to like the AJ Elizabeth thing. But other characters, such as Ian Buchanan's Duke Lavery, also came back from the dead around the same time. You had some scenes with him, and just like the AJ character, it seemed to fizzle. do you think that it was fan reaction that led to, say, Dukes being killed off? I think not long after AJ was killed off again. What impact do you think that fans have upon what happens in a serial drama? Because, like I said, in the '80s, it seemed that when fans, and this is before social media, when fans would write into the soaps or to the soap magazines, that impacted. But oddly enough, it seems with social media and the immediacy of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all that, it doesn't have that impact, because when I look online, for example, AJ, people wanted to see AJ. They wanted more Quartermains. They wanted less of Sonny and the mob, but they wanted more AJ and the Quartermains. But it seemed almost for fans like me that the powers that be are tone deaf. And like I said, you had what seemed to be the fans seemed to like the Elizabeth and AJ pairing. So how much do fans influence, do you think, the writing of soap operas today?
Well, I can only give you my assumption of the influence. And I mean, obviously, the production team, the production staff would be a much better barometer to answer that question. I think the fans have a lot of input. I think that the producers do listen to the fans. I think social network now is allowing the fans to have an even greater reciprocity with their shows, to give their opinions for better or for worse. The other thing, though, is a lot of the shows are written, 3-4 months out, and I think, it's kind of like once the direction of the ship sets sail, it's one of those deals where it takes a while to turn the direction of the ship. So even if fans are saying, hey, we don't like this, or we love this, the story's already been written, and actors have been given the story. It sometimes takes a while for the fans' comments to resonate in what you see on the show.
Well, let me end this segment, and the final segment will give you some closing remarks about acting, your career, soaps, whatever you want to talk about, and we'll do that in a moment. Speaking about acting with Sean Kanan, he's a well-known actor in both U.S. soap operas. Also, he's done film and other things too. Before I let you go, I just wanted to ask, I'm looking on IMDb. It looks like in the last year or so, you've done four productions of 5th of July, Limelight, The Hack, Craigslist Mafia. Are these indie films or what?
Yeah, this has been a really interesting, I would say, 18 months for me. I've been fortunate enough to do several indie films. I did one called South 32, which came out. I did another one called Limelight, and then I just finished a film called The 5th of July with Jaleel White, who I think a lot of people remember from Family Matters. Okay. It's funny because I used to watch him all the time on that show, and it was a lot of fun to work with him. So, this has been an interesting year and a half for me. I've got to do some very different stuff, play some different roles, and that's what I like to do. I like to reach out to as many different things as I can.
Yeah. Two final questions, I guess. Do fans ever mix up reality? Are you ever like on a plane and an old lady comes up to you and slaps you and says, "Deacon, I hate you," or "AJ, you lousy drunk you"?
It's funny you say that. It used to happen a lot when Karate Kid first came out. I used to get so many little kids who would come up to me and go, "You are Daniel's son." And they play the Karate Kid franchise over and over again. So now there's an entire new generation of 8-year-olds that want to kick my butt. And yes, sometimes people will. It's funny. A woman came up to my wife one time and grabbed her and said, "He's a really bad guy." She's like, "Well, what are you talking about? Do you know Sean?" She's like, "No, but if you watch him on that show, he's a really bad guy." So I think sometimes people do conflate, the characters I play with who I am in real life. But I guess in a strange way, that's a bit of flattery.
Well, let me ask one final question, and it's not so much acting as personal. I saw that apparently a few months ago before the election, you had caught in caught some like internet media flack because you supported Donald Trump for president. And certainly Hollywood has always been thought of as sort of very liberal acting and the arts and whatnot. Have you gotten any flack personally, or has that hurt your career? Have people in Hollywood said, well, we don't want to see him, or is that just par for the
I don't know. I mean, I think it's the sort of thing where you never know if it's hurt you, because people don't call you up and say, hey, we're not going to see you for this part. They just don't see you for the part.
Yeah.
I have no regrets in what I've said. I stand by what I said, and I like to think that Hollywood is supposed to be an arena of tolerance, and I expressed my opinion. Other people expressed theirs. Let the chips fall where they may.
Let me just ask then a final acting question, because you're about a year or so younger than me, and so now as you're heading towards the second half of your century on this planet, do you ever fear that as you get older, parts will shrink up? I mean, you're part of an actors union.
Listen, if parts are the only thing that shrinks up, then I guess I'm pretty lucky, right? It's funny when you're a man, it actually tends to be a more target-rich environment, part-wise, as you get older.
Yeah.
For a long time, I was kind of too young to play the doctor, the attorney, the dad, and now obviously I'm in that age group. So I think Hollywood tends to be a lot less forgiving for actresses than actors. But I think for actors, as you get older, there really still remain quite a few viable parts and options. So for that, I'm very fortunate. We'll see. I certainly am sure my career is going to be different this next 10 years than it was this last 10 years, and that's part of what makes acting and the career of acting interesting. You kind of never know where it's going to take you or whom you're going to work with, and I think that's exciting. I embrace change.
Well, I've been speaking with Sean Kanan. I will link to your Twitter page below this video. I want to thank you for spending about an hour speaking with me about your career and your life as an actor.
Dan, thank you very much. It was my pleasure, and thank you to your audience for tuning in. And I want to wish you all the best. Wish everybody a fantastic 2017.